Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a super interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This hulking chunk of titanium and steel is the Ketuo Soulstone, designed by somebody from our community, actually. The Beard of Doom is actually somebody who's been in my community for a very, very long time and has had his own content. Yeah, I thought that was really, really cool that Beard designed something. And if you're wondering what's the Soulstone referencing, my assumption is that it was the Soulstone from Diablo, and he popped into a live stream and confirmed that. Furthermore, I believe, unless I was mistaken, confirmed what I thought, which was if you took the knife and created a mirror duplicate, right, and sort of faced it toward itself, you would create essentially exactly the Soulstone from Diablo. I think that's really, really cool. It definitely creates a bizarre shape, but it also kind of works for what it is. It's a huge, intentionally overbuilt, hulking piece of cutlery. But yeah, it's kind of funny how well it works. But we're going to talk all about it. We're going to talk about pros and cons. Thanks so much to Ketuo for sending this in for me to take a look at. It is available. I'll link it down in the description. You guys can check it out if you want to. It does help my channel and use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this big boy. It is not small. It is not only is it super thick, but it's also huge. 9 inches, maybe just a hair shy. It is. It's like 8.9. I think it's, well, is my tape off though? I think it's intended to be 9 inches. Blade length, I'm going to call that almost, I'm going to say 3.9, 3.95. And then your cutting edge is about 3.85 inches. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. Up against the AD10 and the AD20.5, which I guess is over here today. It's one of the few knives that when I do the size comparisons, it's actually quite a bit larger than the AD10. Not only is it longer and taller, it is also substantially thicker, both in blade and the scales. I know I have some aftermarket scales on this guy, but yeah, it's much, much bigger. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. No surprise here, much larger. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Grip Tillionaire, in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. Okay, yeah, it's huge. How's the action? So with this being a Ketuo knife, which is also like they're kind of like Reich OEM'd knives, I would have expected this to be incredibly tight, especially considering how big and monstrous the titanium frame lock is. And it is substantial, definitely. But if you guys have noticed here, this is a combination fuller and front flipper with no jimping. So does it work? Yeah. It actually is really, it's actually surprisingly, I mean, aggressively smooth. I can use this fuller here to pretty easily reverse flick this thing, which is cool because the detent is definitely like, I'd call that on the heavier side, but where you're getting leverage is just absolutely ideal to deploy it. So this is surprisingly enjoyable to deploy. Usually knives like this, I'm like, they usually don't get these exactly right, so they're not going to work super well. You know, we've come a long way since the days of like Medford being the only person who's making overbuilt knives, and we just have to deal with the clunky awkwardness of those things. No, we've had plenty of big, chunky, overbuilt designs that actually deploy in a really satisfying way. Max Ace Hephaestus is a great example as a flipper, but I never thought we'd see the day, or at least I thought it'd be a lot longer before we saw a front flipper overbuilt knife that actually works. Access to the lock bar, super easy. You have so much room in there. Comes down on the forward choil, turn it, let it fall into position. It's hilariously easy to operate. It's also hilariously comfortable to operate. I honestly am kind of blown away by this. If you were to describe this on paper, I would say you're describing a unicorn. It doesn't exist, right? But it does. Let's do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. Yeah, it's thick. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This was a comical thing to carry around, but I feel like those of us who do periodically at least enjoy carrying overbuilt knives, like we know, you know what you're going to put in your pocket and you know it's going to be ridiculous, but it's fun. And these are the types of knives where you're just begging for someone to ask for a pocket knife so that you can casually hand them this. Not that most of us would want to do it ourselves. You can casually deploy this thing as if it's no big deal. It's huge. This is incredibly cumbersome in the pocket. Only people who are used to carrying absolutely oversized monster knives are going to be comfortable with this. The vast majority of people, yeah, you're putting two huge chunks of titanium and a huge chunk of steel in your pocket. It is a lot to dedicate to. Way longer, way taller than both the PM2 and Para 3, and far, far thicker. I mean, this is a huge object. So materials, obviously, contoured titanium, which is something that's worth pointing out. Full titanium backspacer, titanium pocket clip. We have bearings, and we have a huge chunk of M390, which I believe they hardened to 60 to 61. The weight on this guy, and by the way, there is milling for weight reduction there. But the weight on this guy, move the spider code there. Come on, turn on. I'm going to guess this weighs somewhere, I think I weighed it in the unboxing, it was 8 something. Yeah, it's 8.6 ounces. So far from the heaviest overbuilt knife that I've shown, but like for me personally, I usually kind of draw the line at about 6 ounces. I make a few exceptions here or there. This is way over my comfort limit. I'm going to guess it's over the comfort limit for most people, but you know, that's a choice you'll have to make for yourself. But it is definitely a heavy object. Let's go ahead and do, let's measure the blade stock thickness so we know exactly where we're at with this thing. That looks bare minimum 1/4 inch. Bare minimum. Let's see here. No, it's actually under. Wow, 230 thousandths. I thought it was right at 1/4 inch. So very, very close though. And then we have, let's do the hardware check. I'll get out my tools. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description. Talks about the tools I use in this channel. I'm going to guess that pivot is a T10. In fact, I kind of remember doing this in the unboxing. T10. And then these are almost certainly T8. We'll check them here anyway. Sorry, I got the wrong bit out. The body screws are almost certainly T8 though. Yeah. So T8, you have a hidden pocket clip screw underneath here. T8, really hardly anything. I mean, this should be actually really, really simple to take apart and put back together, maintain, etc. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. All right, meat and potatoes time. Is this actually a comfortable thing to hold on to? Yeah, it is. There's so much material and it's so beautifully chamfered and contoured that it's really just comfortable. It honestly feels like the type of object where they created the ergonomics by taking a big chunk of clay and just squeezing it, and then whatever shape came out is what they shaped the handle. Obviously not really, but the shape here actually is very, very comfortable. The jimping up here is actually functional. I kind of wish that they ribbed it like all the way through. They kind of flattened it out up top, but you can still get traction on that stuff. I kind of also wish that they jimped it right here, but that's still okay. You can definitely choke up right behind the blade. The pocket clip, that's a big pocket clip, and it also goes well past the 50% line on the length of the blade. You're going to notice that. If you use this pocket knife to cut over and over and over again, big thick pieces of cardboard, something like that, we'll talk about the cutting geometry. Yeah, you're going to notice that pocket clip. It's a big, ridiculous milled clip that's pretty tight. Not too bad, but it is tight. You're going to notice that, right? It's not sharp anywhere. It's just a big, tall, chunky clip. The blade shape, Warncliffe with, it's just like a double-notched Warncliffe. Can you actually make use of these? Kind of. The second one up here, I'd say maybe, you know, a little bit of a place to put your finger to do some draw cuts, right? I think it's mostly just to complete the shape of the Soulstone. When we talk about the edge geometry, this is a ridiculously thick knife. Flat carries out something like 70% of the length of the blade, and it comes down to, I'm gonna call that a very thick edge. The factory cutting edge is definitely sharp. So, you know, if you think like knives like this can't cut, they definitely can. It's definitely, whoops, sorry about that. I just bashed it into the camera. But knives like this absolutely can cut. It's very, very sharp from the factory, as you can see here. The issue is that this is such a super thick chunk of material that when you go to cut into something like rubber, wood, cardboard, rope, styrofoam, right, you're going to be met with a lot of resistance because you're pushing this entire wedge of material through it. So a thinner blade obviously is always going to be better. A lot of people look at big, thick, crazy overbuilt knives and assume that they are far more durable than a smaller knife. I suppose you do get a little bit of extra durability with the general thickness of material, but you have to remember the weakest point of any folding knife is going to be the pivot. And the pivot on this knife isn't necessarily that much stronger than a regular knife. Now, this is not something that people who design or create overbuilt knives are trying to deceive people with. In reality, they know this, and they know that their buyers know this, and they also know that their buyers are just enjoying the fact that they made this big, hulking, crazy object for fun, right? Everybody's just kind of having fun with it. And this can be really confusing to newer people or people who are, I think, maybe just like cynical by nature or just assume that everybody's out to deceive everybody, right? If you're from the outside looking in, it's easy to come to that conclusion. But I can tell you, as someone who's been a member of the knife community for a very long time, and also somebody who has enjoyed, the kind of super niche of overbuilt knives, there's no deception going on. Everybody kind of realizes what's going on. But this is all folding knives in general, also not objects that you really should be doing anything outside of just general cutting, right? So while I do think that this is probably a bit more robust than, say, something like, the Opinel, like if you're going to abuse the Opinel versus abusing this, I think this will stand up 10 times over, right? But in reality, we should just be using this stuff for general cutting tasks, which this will do just fine. It just does it in a far more clunky and laborious way. What's the black? Is it DLC? No, it's PVD. I wish at this price point that we wouldn't see PVD unless they're using it to because here's the benefit of PVD is it provides some corrosion resistance, and it's better than paint, right? Like the stuff that you'd find on an actual gas station knife. But it's not really anything special. Same way with your Cerakote, right? The really premium coating is DLC. That stuff is super tough and also provides corrosion resistance and can also be polished. PVD is kind of cool if you want to add some color, right? I mean, the sapphire blue that ProTech uses is a PVD. So I think, if you're trying to gain a few little teeny tiny utilitarian benefits, but also add some cool color and flair, then sure. But at this price point, especially if it's going to be black anyway, I think it should just be DLC. I think this comes in two different configurations. It's more kind of a silvery or like a satin, and then also this PVD. But it's fine, and I honestly think the price tag, especially comparing it with not other titanium and M390 knives, other overbuilt titanium and whatever premium steel knives, I think the price tag is still pretty good. So you could almost kind of just ignore. It's almost like the PVD is just a bonus, but I do wish that it was a DLC. I think this would look awesome in a satin DLC. Something that I really, really appreciate about the aesthetic of this knife is that there is no branding anywhere except the backspacer, which is easily missable. Beard didn't even put his own information on the knife. It just says Ketuo on the back, which I think is fine. It's cool, right? I mean, it's a weird shape. It's definitely a polarizing shape. But I do appreciate they just left everything else off of it. It's nice. It's also very simple, and the all of the uniqueness just comes from the shape. Excuse me. I don't know that I've ever seen a knife that was exactly this shape. Fit and finish. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Fit and finish is spectacular, as we would expect from something that is OEM'd by Reich/Ketuo, right? So like the cutting bevel, it's even all the way across. I will point out though, that plunge grind, oh boy. If you plan to use this knife and only this knife, or this knife alongside just a couple of others, and you plan to use it hard and have to sharpen it a lot, that's going to create a problem for you pretty quickly. If you're like me and you casually use this stuff and you got a ton of knives in rotation, then probably not, right? It just depends on how much you're going to sharpen. Excuse me. We have a lanyard bar back here for people who want to attach a lanyard to it. Pretty big knife, pretty pinchy clip. It's not the worst knife to add a lanyard to. Pocket clip is right hand only. That's a bummer. I wish we had a lefty mounting position. In and out of the pocket, honestly, is not that bad. I'm in sweatpants with a zipper today in the pocket, which is, God, that's annoying. How many of you, when you buy athletic, I love the athletic pants, they're just comfortable. But those stupid zipper pockets, man, it really sucks trying to carry a pocket knife with those. And I know there's companies who make these pants are like, we do not care about that, right? But It just sucks that so many of these companies who make these pants you have to put a zipper in there. It just kills it. But in and out of the pockets of pants that don't have zippers, it's not that bad. It's just really, really pinchy, and you have to fight it a little bit, but not the worst thing in the world. The relief cut, located right here, we do actually have a steel lock bar insert. It's just really hard to see, and it's not threaded all the way through to the other side, so you're not going to see it there. But it does also double as the over travel stop. Your lockup percentage is right here. That is a lot of surface contact, and I'll actually show you back here. We're looking at, for the total amount of space it can lock up on this knife, probably 40 to 50%. That is a much larger surface area than on a regular frame lock, so it's engaging fully. The stop pin is actually internal, and the bar's attached to the blade. It's riding around grooves that are cut into the titanium on either side, so they stop internally. I think that's great. No blade play up, down, left, or right. Not a hint of lock stick. No pivot lash. Very smooth and consistent in here. A nice clicky detent. I have deployed this thing multiple times, and I noticed that it was slightly off center. I'm not sure if it came that way from the factory, or if me just deploying it and playing with it, which I definitely have been doing over and over again, has actually caused that to be the case. So let's try real quick. I want to try, since it's off-centered on the other side, I want to try loosening it just a bit and see if I can tighten it back down, and that'll bring that blade back over. I'm not convinced that it will. I think this actually did, see, I don't want to get it too tight because I don't want to crush those bearings or, crush anything around it. This is probably something that I could fix with the paper trick, which is what I usually do, but I think this knife actually did come off-centered from the factory. This is not something that's typical of Reich or Ketuo, but it is the case on this knife. So at this price point, definitely knives need to come perfectly centered, though I would guess mine is a bit of a goofy one. If you own this knife, you'll have to let me know what your experience with the centering was. But yeah, let's like I said, if somebody were to ask me, what do you think? You think it's going to be centered? I would say, yeah, probably. It's probably 0.2% of them that are slightly off center. And even if that is the case, you can adjust, the body screws and the pivot to get it perfectly centered. But yeah, they should all come centered at this price point for sure. So what is the price tag on this? It's $385. That is a lot of money to pay for a simple titanium frame lock with M390 steel. But we don't have a simple titanium frame lock with M390 steel. We have a knife that is literally made with at least twice the amount of material used in your typical M390 and titanium frame lock, right? It's easily twice the material. So if we are specifically making the argument off material alone, that's the end of it. It should cost $500, right? Because what we typically see for these materials, right, pretty simple, is between $200 and $250. So, right, so say $400. It actually still costs less than that. Add in the fact that we have, in my opinion, it is actually properly heat-treated M390, 60 to 61 is pretty good. We have contouring on the titanium. We have a big titanium backspacer and a big titanium pocket clip, right? Whether you like how it looks, you don't like how it looks, that has absolutely nothing to do with the price tag. But the cost of creation for something like this and the total amount of material will definitely go into it. Factor in the fact that Reich has really, really good precision tolerances. These are premium knives. They are not slapped together on some sort of assembly line or anything like that. These are definitely made very, very carefully. Yeah, compared to other overbuilt Chinese knives utilizing the same materials or apples to apples knives, I would say this is priced very, very well. The only thing that I think is out there right now that is priced better is probably the Miguron Geddon. You could say the Arma at $300, but the Arma is not quite as big. It is contoured and textured. It's a little bit smaller, right, but it does utilize less material. I'd say maybe the Arma and the Geddon from Miguron are examples that are priced better. But I have far more examples of knives that are definitely in the overbuilt premium Chinese category that are far more expensive. So yeah, I'm not super upset with that price tag. I think they did a pretty good job. So, if this is something that you're interested in, sure. Do I recommend this to the average person? No. No, this was a project that was clearly meant to just be for fun, and it's something that A Beard of Doom enjoyed, and he knew that a select few other people would really, really enjoy. But this is not the type of knife that caters or is something that's interesting to the average person. It's specifically meant for a very, very small group of people within a niche community already, and that's exactly who it's serving, right? So for those of you who are interested in this, if you pick it up, do I think you'll enjoy it? Absolutely. It'll put a huge smile on your face. To everybody else, do you need to be spending $385 on something like this to maybe kind of you're rolling the dice, right? If this isn't your type of knife, I would say buy something that's more your type of knife, right? But I think they accomplished exactly what they set out to do, and they put a reasonable price tag on it for what it is. That's going to be it today, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.